from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London and I'm still recovering from what feels like a very special night at the Oval for the launch of the 100 competition. It's been a bit controversial. There's still plenty of questions to be answered as to how this tournament's going to pan out and if the vast sums of money spent on it are all going to be worth it, what impact it might have on other forms of the domestic game in England. But the opening match was special. It was a women's game, a record crowd, a really diverse family crowd on a balmy evening. There were boys and girls bouncing to the sound of a DJ, pumping out summer dance tunes, and a quality game of cricket was on free-to-air prime-time BBC television and beamed around the world. A wonderful platform for a game that seems to have had a pretty big impact already.
Very envious, Ali. It's Jim Maxwell for the ABC in Sydney. Serious lockdown here. The only bubbles might be from something you pull out of the fridge, the champagne, but otherwise it's bubble, toilet and trouble, lockdown wherever you go in Australia, other than maybe Queensland or Western Australia. But that's how it is. So it gives us a chance to listen to the radio and watch the telly, and hopefully something like an Australian win in the Caribbean will come up again.
As it has. Well, congratulations on that. This is Charu Sharma for All India Radio. I'm still at the Goldface Hotel in Colombo, where the Indians, of course, came back from behind, if I can say so. A terrific show to take the one-day international series, which, by the way, is now India's 10th consecutive series win against Sri Lanka. That's in ODIs. Of course, the T20s are still to follow. Which, of course, begs another question, though, because I still feel that the gap between the top 3 or 4 nations and the rest is only increasing. That can't be good for cricket, can it? But let's focus on the 100 because I think it's new and exciting. I don't know what Jim might have to say about that, but I'm all for an adventure, and it looks like the 100 is one.
Yeah, well, we have to start with talking about that. I mean, Jim, with you in lockdown in Australia, it's amazing, like the number of COVID cases in England, and yet things are opening up, and that enabled people to come to the 100, restrictions lifted, but people still trying to do it in a safe way, many of them. But yeah, it's been a long time coming, the 100. It had been delayed a year because of the COVID pandemic, but it finally got underway on a warm, hot Wednesday evening in the middle of a heatwave in the UK. And as I mentioned, it opened with a women's match, which is a real statement from the organisers as they look to elevate the women's game alongside the men's. So there are 8 newly formed teams based in 7 cities. It's a game where each innings lasts 100 balls, so it's a bit shorter than a T20 with some other tweaks here or there. It was still a game of cricket. It was a good one at that. I was commentating at the Oval as the Oval Invincibles narrowly beat the Manchester Originals. Here's a little taster of what it sounded like.
Right, here comes the countdown. It's a moment of history.
Sun is out as Cap is in again. Short ball heaved over the leg side, this time by Boyce, and this will be 4 more.
That was an appeal for a caught behind there.
There's a clear spike.
And there was a nick. The first wicket falls in the 100 with a vibe. Carlos Brathwaite described it as feeling very CPL, a little bit Big Bash-like as Villiers is in. Now Boyce using her feet in the air and caught on the edge of the circle.
Harmanpreet Kaur runs it down towards the boundary at deep third, and the 100 comes up for the Manchester Originals.
We're hearing that there are 7,395 in at the Oval, and for a women's domestic match, that I'm pretty sure will be confirmed as a record. Ishmael sends the ball back into the keeper's gloves, and so Manchester Originals have compiled a total of 135 from their 100 balls. Cross is in again, bowled! 2 wickets in 2 balls for Kate Cross. She's going to be on a hat-trick. This is high into the leg side. Has she got enough on it to clear the boundary, or is it a catch? No, it's through the hands and over the rope. Good to see just so many families and kids in the crowd, and when Becky Hill was on stage, so many had their arms in the air, clapping along.
And we have 10 balls left of the first game of the 100. 16 runs needed. This game is right in the balance. Oh, what a superb innings this has been. Van der Kerk reaches 50. 1 needed. 3 balls left. Here comes Kate Cross. Outside edge, that'll do the job. A huge roar of delight from Van der Kerk. And we've been treated to a real spectacle in this first game of a new tournament with just 2 balls left. The Oval Invincibles get home.
Well, you heard it there. A historical evening, the first game of the 100. Let's speak to one of the victorious Oval Invincibles players, bowler Tash Farrant. He took 3 wickets on the night. Tash, welcome to Stumped. How are you feeling the morning after the night before?
I'm feeling a bit exhausted, to be honest. It was just such an incredible evening. I feel I've still got goosebumps, to be honest. The crowd were absolutely amazing. I texted the Beth Barrett-Ward, who's obviously in charge of the women's side of the 100, and just said it's the best game that I've ever played in, ever been a part of. The atmosphere was electric, and I'm just buzzing, to be honest. I can't really put it into words, but yeah, it was just such an also brilliant game of cricket, because that's what it is. That's what the 100 is. It's still cricket. And yeah, just absolutely buzzing this morning.
Did you have any apprehension beforehand about, gosh, will people come? Will it be a success? What's going to happen?
Yeah, of course. I think everyone did, really. I think the amount of work that's put into it, and obviously having sort of a 2-year build-up, obviously having not played last season, I think everyone was apprehensive, but I think the work that's been put in, it was always going to be a success. And having the women's game first just really showed that they're really trying to push the women's game forward, which is so important. And then to have the reaction that it did, just walking around the crowd after, everyone just seems to absolutely be loving it. So, yeah, I think it was a great success last night.
Yeah, and could you compare that crowd and that vibe? It's the best game that you've been involved in, but how would you describe the type of people that were watching? Because that's been a real driver of the 100, isn't it? The ECB saying, too many of our cricketers are unrecognisable, so they want a platform, but also we want to just broaden it, and it's about diversity, it's about youth, and it's about families. How did you read the crowd?
Yeah, 100%. I think obviously there was loads of young kids in, which is great to see, loads of young girls, which is awesome for myself to see, and just, yeah, really diverse crowd. It was quite funny. I was fielding on the boundary, actually, and there was a wide, and I heard a girl go, "Oh, does that mean she's out?" I was like, "Oh, no, still learning." But so it's great to have people who come. Yeah, that's the point of the 100, getting people along who haven't necessarily watched cricket. I know a lot of my friends came who have never seen a cricket game, and they absolutely loved it. So that's the whole point of the 100. And yeah, the crowd felt really diverse, and I mean, they made a lot of noise last night, which was the best thing.
Hello, Tash, Jim Maxwell. You're full of excitement about it all. Can you just explain in a couple of words what's the difference in this format to what you normally do?
It's very similar to T20 cricket. It's definitely a bit more fast-paced than T20. You have less time to sort of do things, so you kind of have to be more precise in the field with field placements and stuff. And obviously, just all the sort of razzmatazz of it is kind of hyped up, which is great. I mean, I'm someone who would really enjoy that, and kind of creates a bit more of a pressure on the players, but also a bit more of a buzz, especially last night around the grounds. Obviously, having the 5 balls and swapping every 10 balls, I think it's just a faster pace of cricket, in my opinion.
Tash, hi, this is Charu Sharma for All India Radio. And congratulations, of course, you're a part of history, winning the first ever match in a new event, and taking 3 wickets must be a big night for you. And if the scheduling is clever, then more people may come to see the women's matches than the men's. But I have to ask you, of course, the players have sort of been mixed around, once again for this new tournament. And have you enjoyed meeting some new players, some of the better players around the world?
Yeah, I think that's why most players play cricket, is being involved in the team. And it was obviously a new format yesterday, one of the biggest crowds that the biggest crowd that I've ever played in front of. So yeah, it's great to sort of learn from the world's best. I feel really lucky to sort of bowl with Cap and Ishmael. Cap is someone who I've always looked up to as a bowler, so I feel pretty privileged to sort of be a seamer alongside those 2 world greats.
Is there anything that you would tweak about the way it ran last night, either as an event or even as a format? Anything about the umpiring, anything about the way it was presented, scores on the screen from a player's point of view?
I think the biggest challenge is going to be to get the 100 balls in the allotted time. I think it is definitely, you have to always be on it, and I think it's quite hard to sort of take a moment and take a breath to sort of gather yourself in the field. So I guess just sort of making allowances for that if needs be.
There's obviously some talk, in terms of the bigger picture and the lead up to the tournament about, the sense of it, of the equality message. And it is a very strong message and a strong narrative. The reality of it is still that women are not paid as much as the men, salary-wise. Yes, there is equal prize money. what impact does a night like last night, and if that is sustained throughout the tournament and that level of visibility, what sort of driver do you think that could be in terms of driving the actual equality agenda for women's cricket?
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing is that we use this platform. The visibility, in my opinion, is the most important thing. If we get the same sort of visibility and put on the TV and the crowds that we got last night, which is all the same as the men, I think that's the most important. And then we can use that platform to show that the women's game it's slightly different to the men's game, but it's as good as the men's game. It's the first year of a new tournament, and it will only, in my opinion, get better as sort of the years goes on. But yeah, I think the visibility is most important, and things will sort of stem from that.
So it's that platform almost to show that women's cricket can be a driver of revenue similar to the men's. You can sell tickets, sell shirts, and pull in that revenue, which has so often been the argument as to why there's a gender pay gap. We know that there's at least sort of 5 players in each squad, aren't there, who are not professionally contracted because of, again, just the evolution and the development of where the game is right now. Again, some players are reported to just be struggling, perhaps, or could struggle to manage jobs and playing in the 100 because you're now in more of a bubble environment, aren't you, because of COVID restrictions. Do you think there should be extra support for those players who, might have some difficult choices to make about, can they actually continue their job whilst playing? And some are reported to have had to make some tricky choices around that.
Yeah, it's obviously really difficult in these times. We're having to sort of be obviously more careful with COVID around and sort of the spike in cases. So, I think it's probably the best way to go forward if we want this tournament to go on. It's obviously really tough for some of the girls who aren't able to work. Hopefully next year things will get better with COVID, that girls can work. And I think the more tournaments that there are, the pay's only going to go up.
Well, it was a really strong opening night, so we'll be watching with interest to see how that carries through the doubleheaders and the rest of the tournament. But well done for the part you played in a historical occasion, Tash, and thank you so much for sharing it with us on Stumped.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, great to get the thoughts and observations of Tash Farrant after that historical night at the Oval. Just on that point of the pay, notable that the lowest paid female players would be on, we believe, just over perhaps 3,500 for the window of the tournament. And if there are players there who have had to take unpaid leave from their jobs because they're unable to keep up their job alongside the 100 because they've now got to effectively bubble for the duration of the event, there was a thought that could the ECB just up their pay a little bit, because they were making payments of, or have been making payments of up to £10,000 to overseas players who have come, and they were offering that amount to, say, Australian players to try and incentivise them and give them encouragement to come, in the COVID times. And we know a number of high-profile players did pull out of the 100 with concerns over COVID and travel and so on. And the England and Wales Cricket Board, in response to the suggestion that couldn't they make some of those compensation payments available to help, the lower paid players, they said that they believe the game will raise the growth and profile of the women's game and inspire more girls to take up the sport. They agree COVID has added significant complexity to staging the tournament, and these compensation payments have been offered to overseas players who, because of quarantine, face longer spells away from home. The ECB add that if any domestic part-time players face challenges carrying out their job whilst playing in the competition because of the COVID restrictions, we'd encourage them to discuss this with their team or with us to assess what support we can offer. And I have to say that is a much softer statement than what was first delivered to the newspaper that first broke the story about that pay issue or the difficulty with juggling jobs when the ECB said that they simply couldn't redirect funds to other players.
Well, similarly for us, Alison, because it's just a coincidence, and I suppose you couldn't avoid it because the Olympics are hogging the limelight. I did catch on to one important aspect, that the players playing against India in the test matches are allowed to go and play for their 100 teams, at least a couple of matches before they play the test. So that's good, because otherwise you tend to sort of just be sitting around and practicing rather than contributing to a team. So at least somebody's thinking sensibly. I just want to go back all the way back to 2 years from now, when I was actually in the UK for the World Cup. And we were talking about the 100 to try and lure new audiences away from football and into cricket. And I said, well, so what's wrong with T20? I mean, this is like a T18 game, basically, but you call it the 100. And it's, but it'll be easier for them to count. I mean, is it something that basic that's going to get people in? Or is it just the kind of atmosphere that shorter matches have? And around the world in the IPL, other T20 matches, the atmosphere is fantastic with all the music and all the rest of the stuff that you mentioned was there last night. That's what's required, not mathematical complication or non-complication. The only question is, this has to grow. It can't just be a standalone tournament. It has to go through schools and everywhere else, and people it should be easy to host 100. But if you need a complicated scoreboard, that's going to be a problem, except for the big, grounds. I mean, imagine a village ground having a complicated scoreboard, or people are saying how many runs now, how many balls now. So we got to watch out for that, though.
This was the most simple scoreboard I'd ever seen. Literally just had number of runs required and number of balls remaining. And that was sort of really all the info that the crowd have. And there might be an argument for saying maybe the crowd could do with a little more in-game narration, for those who actually want to know, who's just fielded that ball. Sure, you had announcers announcing bowlers coming in. One, tweak I would make would be certainly to have the score visible at all times, because often the screens just went to replays, and if there was a cheer or there'd been a six, you'd look up and all you'd see was the replay. You wouldn't actually know, well, what does that mean now? How many balls and how many runs left, which is the most important thing at all times. So I'd tweak that. Timing, yes, I've got to watch, as Tash said, that these matches don't start to creep longer, because that's a key element of it. And I think in this first one did finish a little beyond what was the schedule finish time. But importantly, for this tournament to be seen as a success, it's got to be making a revenue and a profit in the long term. The women's game stands to only benefit from this competition. They've never had anything like it before. It's the biggest platform for them to grow, to develop, to evolve, to increase professionalism. It was certainly a strong start for a tournament that has been controversial from the moment it was announced. Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. My thanks to Charu Sharma, Jim Maxwell, and of course to you all for listening, and our special guest Tash Farrant. Don't forget you can keep in touch with the show during the week. We're at BBCWS Sport and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. In the meantime, stay safe. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.